Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
This is the Open Source Report on the 8th of October 2017, coming to you from WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. As we roll into the month of October, in most parts of at least the continental U.S., we're in the 70s, with the exception in certain areas that Hurricane Nat is there. But the open source movement itself is rolling along, and we at Cranston are trying to roll along with it. You may hear, and we also invite you to tune in to our other programs carried by many of the same outlets, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Blog Talk, the iTunes franchise, and various others in between that are out there in our own Boston Red Network that carry our broadcasts. The stable kernel is 4.13.5. That's a stable Linux kernel. We are using 4.9.52, and looking at it here, it's a long-term kernel, here released, let's see, it's on the 8th of October, the latest release of it. And this says we're running with the Slackware edition as we usually are. Now, the release candidate 3 that is out there is 4.14 release candidate 3. So again, the latest stable is at 4.13.5. So we are moving along here, and the kernel is becoming much more stable. One of the things that you actually want to do is, at least in the Slackware world and in the Ubuntu and various other the Red Hat worlds, you can update these kernels. You can actually go here and update the kernel if you wish by just simply patching it. Or in the case of Slackware, we get the kernel and it is automatically an automated process. And the libraries. Now, the libraries are very, very important. You want to keep your libraries updated, and the maintainers of the Slackware kernel project, I should say, are very good at keeping those libraries up to date, because they can break things and cause numerous problems out there. Today we'll look at the state of open source as it applies to governmental contracts, and we'll also look at Equifax. One of the big problems with government contracting, and it has always been a problem, is there is a permanent list of certain vendors in the software business. Oracle being one. We'll talk about Oracle. And IBM and various others are on the quote-unquote short list. An example was a contract with the IRS, and this is a no-bid contract, that was given to Equifax. And, of course, Equifax is the organization that literally was hit with a security breach, and they ended up literally exposing hundreds of thousands of names of people, information, social security numbers, etc., out there. And also in the news, Yahoo was hit in 2013. Now that they are part of Verizon, that information is also coming out there. And we have the ongoing situation with the Wells Fargo banking enterprise and their various types of nefarious schemes they have out there. It hasn't done not as much, but on this program we'll talk more and more about security, because security is there, and what open source has to do with it. Let me just go to a different screen here and get on the server, and this is Tech Dirt, and we'll put it in a link to it. We are utilizing of their information, as we do many times here. We do not have a monopoly on factual information, as Mr. Monahan would say. And because of this, we are going to have to use our glasses. And this starts out here. I don't have the precise date. Well, we do have the precise date on it. It's the 3rd of October, 2017. Oracle tells the White House, stop hiring Silicon Valley people and ditch open source. Now, this is a statement from Oracle, an attack on the open source community. And they issued the statement from the heart of Silicon Valley, according to this blog. And it tends to represent, I put my glasses on for this. It tends to represent the opposite of nearly everything that is accepted wisdom around here. This is the latest crusade against open source technology being used by the federal government, and against the government hiring of people out of Silicon Valley to help create more modern systems, instead of Oracle would apparently prefer the government use its systems that cost tons of money. There's no doubt about the tons of money that these systems cost. First, some background over the past few years. One of the most positive things involving the federal government and technology has been the success of two similar programs, very different organizations in the U.S. government. One is called the U.S. Digital Service and the 18F. If you are completely unfamiliar with them, there's plenty of articles describing both projects. But one is a good but this one is a good overview. The short version is that both projects are an attempt to convince internet modern tech. To the government, introduce into the government, and has been a huge success in a variety of ways, such as creating a federal government website, sites that are modern, secure, and actually work. And we saw this unfold on the Affordable Care website. They had the Oracles of the world and various other people there, and those people came up with totally dysfunctional sites and were sued by the likes of the state of Oregon, etc. The Trump administration has been adamant that it supports both organizations as well, and they are important to continue to modernize the federal government. These offices are not politicized, and they have been some of the best proof that we've got the government doing the right. Involves smart and dedicated technologies. As we move along with this, we should have put this on where the print would be a little larger, but anyway, we'll get through it. Okay, and of course, not everyone is thrilled with these organizations. Old school federal contractors, Oracle included, for one, have been grumbling aloud about 18F daring to do things like making government procurement open to small businesses. After all, these contractors have spent decades charging the federal government billions for crappy products. In fact, if the story of the FBI and their new system they were contemplating, they spent $1 billion on it and then threw it in the trash can. And it wasn't a trash can of history. Being an actual engineer who realizes that it's crazy to spend so much money on crappy solutions, especially when there are much better solutions that are often open and seem to really pass off some folks who have grew fat and happy overcharging the government, and they found some front groups who argued that these programs are a waste of government money that would be better spent giving billions to the private contractors. Either way, the Trump administration, following the Trump executive order, request feedback on how best to modernize government, IT. This request for comments and to submit comments are on GitHub, which is nice to see. Many are quite interesting, but one that really catches my eye is the Oracle submission, which I can only describe as curmudgeonly, in other words, out of date, out of character, beyond the pale. A little more background: if it weren't for Oracle's failures, there might not even be a U.S. DS. The U.S. DS grew out of the emergency hiring for some of top-notch internet engineers in response to, and we just talked about this, the healthcare.gov rollout. And I don't recall a big part of that debacle was blamed on. And if you don't recall, was blamed on Oracle technology. So perhaps it's not surprising that Oracle might hold a bit of a grudge against U.S. the digital service. Similarly, Oracle likes to claim that it is supportive of open source technology. Now, this is one of the things that many of these corporations claim to be in support of open source technology. But effectively, through Ellison, the head of Oracle, has been a quote-unquote libertarian. Another interesting note is these libertarian types always are the first ones to run to the federal government for a convenient handout. Period. So this is basically what set up the digital service, and it is known that open source has been eating Oracle's lunch for a very, very long time. And Oracle, of course, has its database. They were in data centers. They were the city of Chicago is a very interesting thing. I think there's still an Oracle house. But now Oracle and old Ellison are in the cloud. Ellison said the cloud was a hoax. But now, virtually, I was talking to an Oracle developer a few months back that he is not in the clouds, therefore his development is stymied, and he was thinking of retiring. So, in other words, that has changed a lot of things, basically, from what used to be, and is now the case out there. And you see a few of these legacy organizations, as Oracle, similarly to a lot of corporations, I should say, they have a lot of cash money on hand, so they are able to buy startups or organizations that do other types of things, such as they bought the open source database and then decided that they would put their little trick on it and have usually what these people do is they do a two-tier operation. They'll have an open source version that everybody contributes to, take the code and then add some bells and whistles to it and come up with their quote-unquote their own proprietary version of it is similarly proprietary depending on what license and so on. That's why it's very important to look at what license you're dealing with. The background here, the sheer contempt found in Oracle's submission on IT modernization is pretty stunning. The letter complains about false narratives that have taken the U.S. Government off track. The false narratives government should attempt to emulate the fast-paced innovations of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is comprised of IT vendors, most which failed. The USG is not a technology vendor, nor is it a startup. Under no circumstances should the USG attempt to become a technology vendor. This, the U.S. General Services, should never develop, support, or secure products economically or at a scale. Government developed products are not the subject to the extensive testing and not subjected to it as in the commercial market, nor as the commercial products. Instead, the government should attempt to emulate the best practices of large private sector Fortune 50 customers which have competed and evaluated procedures and secure commercial technology success. Now, I suppose Equifax is one of those organizations. Now, this is kind of funny to follow something having to do with government IT projects now past a few decades as compared to what happens on projects where the digital service and F-18 have been involved. For example, a big new $600 million, only $220 million over budget government system the FBI paid for was useless for catching terrorists and had to be completely written off. And then we just talked about that one. And on a crime spree, the day the system launched, and knowing the FBI wouldn't be functional. The same system that was so bad that the contractor who was trying to do something so simple as to add a printer to a network had to hack the system, accessing the usernames, passwords of 38,000 FBI employees, including Robert Mueller, just to do his job. This isn't really the kind of world we want to go back to, no doubt, with the digital service and F-18 out there. Now, there's at least some truth to the idea that developing things from scratch is not ideal in many cases, but that claiming that these decisions made on government IT shouldn't have development knowledge is ludicrous. There's no doubt about that. And the FBI narrative here, let's move on down here. This is the most ridiculous of all. Copyright law is pretty clear on the works of the federal government shouldn't be subject to copyright. And many in the federal government have embraced variations on open source systems to live up to their requirements. The idea that open source somehow creates disincentives to work with the U.S. government is hilarious. Maybe for a company like Oracle, but tons of others are happy to work with the government, and lots of open source technology has made government IT faster, cheaper, and more secure. So this is part of it, and then you go to the Equifax, stems from Equifax failure to patch is a widely discussed bug that a competent administrator should have patched. The bug was found, and the patch, because it was open source. Speaking of false narratives, Oracle also claims that open source technology is being used less and less in the corporate world. That's a lie. Open source has has many appropriate users and should be competed against a proprietary software for the best fit and functionality for any workload. But the fact is that the use of open source software has been declining rapidly in the private sector. There is no math that can justify open source from being from a cost perspective, as the cost of support plus the opportunities of forging of futures, functionality, automation, and security overwhelming any presumed cost savings. The action of F8 and the digital service plainly promote open source solutions, and that promulgates those mandates across the government. Now, the view here is that the government is one of the largest buyers of technology in the U.S. Now, as far as what the private sector is doing and is not doing, we have to look at basically who the private sector is and where many of these failures are taking place. If you look at the financial sector, which includes banking, shadow banking, etc., there have been many breaches in those organizations. And of course, Equifax is the motherlode of all security breaches. But again, looking at historical IT implementation per U.S. government and the digital service, you'll see example after example of being the outsourced private large government contract companies who work result in massive maintenance costs. Seriously, this is entire filing by Oracle is one giant false narrative of people living in denial about that. Well, it's not denial, it's actually that they're living in a situation that is profitable to them. Let me just go to this, no. This is an older article here, but it's about open source. Oracle raises open source problem, and this was in June. This is 2015. Oracle may miss yet another earnings target. Open source databases could be the culprit there. No doubt about it. Oracle stumbled. The most persistent rise of open source databases, both rational databases and non-rational, the NoSQLs, as recent the Bloomberg article there had detailed that. Now, that was 2 years ago. Oracle can no longer count on its near monopoly in the database systems, as the emergence of big data, cloud computing, other available in the open source version that cost far less to use, and along with a customer base eager for alternatives. At the same time, younger competition such as Salesforce.com, Workday are picking off Oracle customers by offering specialized software applications, again sold by subscriptions. To credit Oracle, it has been juicing up its cloud business. We talked about that earlier. We won't repeat ourselves. While open source databases are finding their way into large corporations, it's really their hold on tomorrow's Fortune 500 that should be of concern to Oracle. Surveying startups valued $1 billion or more, Bloomberg found that none of the companies surveyed indicated they had a large Oracle database. Now, this flies in the face of many, many things. Sucking the life from the market. Now, before the open source database startups uncork champagne, it's worth remembering that free doesn't pay anyone. It might be nice to empty Oracle's pockets, but currently the money lost in the market isn't being recouped by open source startups. Now, MySQL, and that was the one I was thinking of there. Martin Mecco, Open Corp, his goal was to shrink a $9 billion rational database market to $3 billion and take a third of the market. And of course, Oracle now owns that. The challenge of building a thriving NoSQL startup. This is from Jeff Kelly. He writes that there's no question that NoSQL database category is on the right side of several secular trends. But the challenge for open source NoSQL database companies is to turn open source users into paying customers in large numbers. Now, these are several, to be clear, companies like MongoDB and DataStack do make most significant amounts of their money, nowhere near the value being sucked out of the market, of course, by the oracles of the world. But we've used MongoDB. It's a good product. I spent time at MongoDB to believe that open source database has a bright future ahead of them. No doubt about that. Oracle will here too in impregnable position atop the heap is not as simple as Oracle's loss to open source gain. So this has always been an issue out there, and will continue to be one. Now, this is some Tech Republic we were looking at here. I guess while we're here, we'll look at SAP 8 bugs here that knocked their servers off. This is on the 5th of October, again from Tech Republic. The most serious flaws, the absence of XAML validation in the web Diamond Pro Flash Island development environment, received a common vulnerability scoring system. Anyway, talking a little bit about XAML here. The absence of XAML validation in SAP's composite application of framework authorization to such separate instances of the absence of XAML validation SAP enterprise portal information disclose flaw in business process management. And this is where SAP is. How to keep your SAP servers from being knocked off line. The lack of XAML validation in, as we talked about, Web Dynamo Pro out of the SAP. I spent a lot of time doing that. But anyway, this is SAP, a flaw being there. And these flaws are prevalent not only you find them in there, but in SAP. A lot of people experience, a lot of people have had with SAP. You run like a maiden from a smallpox situation there. Let me just grab one other thing here. Oops. This is Pixelbook from Google. Google is one of these companies reports to be basically off open source, but not exactly. Nonetheless, has unveiled Pixelbook, and the Chromebook is a serious laptop option for business users. Not only is it hardware spaced out to make Chrome OS lightning fast, and the hardware is impeccably designed to rival any conventional laptop on the market. Smart People's Guide there. They have a little summary here. What is Pixelbook? The Pixelbook is the latest high-performance Chromebook. Does Google's Pixelbook matter? It is an idea that any user needs a seamless Google Apps and Google Assistant integrated in the flagship level hardware. Does Pixelbook affect? The Pixelbook affects any Chromebook user looking for high quality hardware. So this is the Pixelbook, and that Google has put out there. Google has flirted, incidentally, with various types of hardware before. It's not the first time they've, as they say, specced out things. It's just one of the things that they have done over a period of time. Let me just fly along here and grab another article here. I think we're grabbing the right article. Well, this is from Black Duck. We use a lot of Black Duck stuff around here. Find and fix the Apache struts vulnerabilities with a free Black Duck threat check. Now, you can use this, detects and inventories all versions of, we'll put this up, of struts out there. This is from Black Hat. Now, GNC. Now, open source and the public sector. This was in the last of September. The federal government continues to devote resources to advancing the company's technology by building a mixture of proprietary open source and mixed source. That's according to a federal code policy. And in 2016 launched CodeGov. Now, we talked about this earlier, and it has been out there for a very long time. Open source, significant part of the nation's digital infrastructure, and the risks associated with this type of software are enough to pick the interests of department officials who must, according to the playbook, publish code of projects or components online and share it to development process, manage security and privacy through reliable processes. Former Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly testified in May of this year that the department itself needed to up its game in terms of cybersecurity, becoming aware of the open source components within any software application that directly influence or provide services to the public is essentially the first step to maintain secure digital structure. Public sector workers should be adhering to the guidelines set forth by the Digital Services Playbook. We talked about that before, updating their policies to be consistent with source code policies. And this is part of it, just literally staying on top of things. That is the biggest problem out there. And now we'll get to Equifax here, bridging the gap between security and DevOps. This is from Stack on the 25th of September. If you are a security type, you couldn't help but witness a recent calling out of Equifax's CICO Susan Marlin and her subsequent departure along with the CIO, while their parting was procedural, indeed predictable. There's a school of thought that says that this was simply a knee-jerk reaction to shore up the tanking share price of Equifax. Whether Equifax can recover from this long term is still to be seen. However, the ongoing fallout and frankly appalling PR, as from Equifax, both the security professionals and the security commentator, I have a foot in two distant camps. One to tell the story accurately, and the other is to point out a salient security reality. Equifax can be better harnessed as a wake-up call to every company. Security and DevOps. Many security professionals struggle to hug to communications on a daily basis with a fast-moving need of developers and operations staff who need to get an application or service from a test development environment. And this is a very, very credible situation. Security teams are not experts in what typical open source libraries are needed for the sake, and we talked about this when we came in, are needed for Pacific Web Server or application stack. They don't tend to have Python, Ruby, or Java skills and rely upon the developers to have taken care of how an application utilizes underlying resources or privileges. Security certificates are partly to blame for the schism, and many standard examinations and security courses do not produce the fast emerging skills needed for cloud, containers, and automation. Instead, they provide an overreaching security baseline capabilities without which we wouldn't be able to provision our platforms or build controls around data authentication, network hardening, and asset protection. The role of ISO is the food chain to provide overall ownership, guidance, steering, etc. The inability of developers to understand the need for misuse cases is important as a justification for change control. And we are looking at retrofitting of behavioral processes, and this is very important here as an activity that has become much harder to track, evolving in the organization that has burst out to the public, hyper cloud, not your usual security type of triangle, but more a plaster on a gaping wound. Throwing stones at glass houses. For those pointing at Equifax, an entire multi-million pound transaction, multi-territorial IT platform that handles close to 2 billion queries a day. Security has a minor breach caused by an oversight. The gap between operational security and developers and the application team. It's a minor breach that will be remembered for decades to come. It destroyed trust, confidence, if it weren't already destroyed, and caught fire on the platform apart from the reputation and share prices of Equifax. It goes further than that. Would you employ anyone who now called Equifax security on their resume? Well, it goes beyond that. Obviously, the patch was overlooked, but if you went to various outlets of Equifax, particularly in the UK and I believe in Spain, it was so bad there that they were using the password admin as the password to literally go into the server for people that needed to get in the server, not the general public, the IT staff. I mean, it was that bad. So it was beyond just a simple patch that was not put back on. And that is part of the problem, is the culture of many of these organizations has been so lax for many years. And also what you have is people that are morphing, going from one particular IT enterprise to the next IT enterprise, and that is causing a big problem there. I was just looking to see what they have. Now this is Snatch here, yeah. Anyway, nothing particularly new here as we move along. What have we done? We've lined up some stories that we need to look at. This is not one of them, I don't think. We won't look at algorithms today. We'll look at this. Union power is putting pressure on Silicon Valley tech giants. Organizations have unionized 5,000 contract workers at Facebook, Yahoo, and more. And this is from Bloomberg on the 14th of September. Something that's been around for a very long time. Organized labor doesn't rack up a lot of wins in Silicon Valley. Needlessly, this is 3 years. They organized 5,000 people at shuttle drivers at Apple, Tesla, Twitter, LinkedIn, eBay, etc., and cafeteria workers at Cisco, Intel, early in the summer, and Facebook. So in other words, they are working around, playing as the baseball manager for the St. Louis Cardinals used to say, small ball. They're organizing workers around to create a union ecosystem. Other things such as arrangements help companies distance themselves from their cafeteria workers. At one time, cafeteria workers, those people would be directly employed by the Facebooks of the world, etc. Now they are contracted out, thus they are not a part of it. So the Working Partnership USA is a California nonprofit that advocates for workers. Tech companies, have been image conscious, no doubt about it. They're out there. The recent efforts in 2014 unionizing 87 Facebook shuttle bus drivers. So Facebook is such a mammoth enterprise now that they have drivers to drive the workers around. Cafeteria workers, etc. I thought we'd just throw that up there. We didn't want to miss out on anything as we roll along. Now let's see what we've got going here. Well, we'll take a break in a minute as we go to open source. We're here now. Linux.com, and let's find what the latest here is. A little survey here. Hiring managers are looking for talent in the following areas: web technologies, cloud technologies, 70% in cloud technologies and web technologies. Some of the things they are looking to find. This week in open source, the Linux Foundation launches open source networking event series, Skype for Linux. Let's look at this and more. This is on October the 6th, incidentally. This week, Linux and open source, and they are synonymous. The Linux Foundation, we've been following them for a very long time there. They are starting to modernize, and hopefully they are moving more towards the open source foundation and liberate software, which is the next step from purely open source. Efforts to drive a vendor collaboration is kicking off OSN services in series, in Paris, Stockholm, Milan, London, Tel Aviv, and in Japan. So they're everywhere, I suppose. Now, Skype for Linux is gaining features found in the Mac version. This is from eWeek. We'll go to it in a minute here. The gap is closer. We use Skype, incidentally, on the Linux Foundation. At one time, when OJ was in jail, we used that. Anyway, back in 2004, back in 1994, 1995, we used pretty much exclusively a Linux system, because at that time it was a little bit different. There was not as much in terms of copyright out there. We could even get PDFs from Adobe, and we could get our sound. There was not a big problem with Java and the copyrights and those sort of things. So we could run a Linux system and not really have any problems. Now it's a bit more complicated when we especially say, look at Java, its insecurities. We have to go around and use gingerbread and some other. I won't get too much into that. But let's go to the the Skype story to close the gap. This is from eWeek. We've used eWeek around here. Maybe they start out, Microsoft really does love Linux. although the giant's efforts surrounding our Linux are focused on cloud customers and software developers. Folks that use Skype on the open source operating system are still on the company's mind. Microsoft has wholeheartedly embraced Linux as it works to attract more enterprise workloads to its cloud. As far as joining the Linux Foundation, they joined that in 2016, and they released a SQL Server in 2017 with Linux support, something they would not have done unless they were forced to. On a desktop, pickings are slim. Microsoft Office, for example, doesn't work on Linux without jumping through some hoops, in other words, putting it in a container. With Skype, Microsoft at least is attempting to narrow the features between the two. The latest preview for Linux, it does a better job mimicking the look, feel, and functionality of both the Windows and Mac editions. A new chat feature will allow you to talk with several friends at the same time. That was announced on the 25th. And let's see. Photos, so you can express yourself in your own style, is encouraging users to cling to previous version of the application to install the preview. We'll have to get that done, including our 4.3 is the version there, announces terms to replace replace Skype for Business client on the 25th, releasing in March and completing the rival Stack platform. The team is a chat-based group collaboration application including Office 360. They've been working to do this for a very long time. Teams will soon inherit many of Skype's virtual meetings and core capabilities. General Manager of Products, what's her name? Lori Wright. Announcement there. However, the company that has already invested in Skype for Business ecosystem won't be left out in the cold, assuming companies that have, Microsoft will continue to support both the cloud and on-premises deployment of Skype for Business for an unspecified time. A new Skype for Business server release is planned for the second half of next year. So, in other words, they are moving on here with it. Let's go very quickly to the blog here. This is just a preview here and a screenshot. I think we'll be able to put the screenshot up. We will. We'll get it up on somewhere. Not sure where we'll put it. Kind of limited on some of our platforms, and particularly on Spreaker with photos. But I think we'll figure out what we're going to do here. Just one of those things where we're thinking, we are doing, and we probably don't want to do too much of that. It's probably not the best in the world to do. Let's get back to eWeek here just a minute and make sure we didn't miss anything. Sometimes what happens is there's, thinking of Bob Schiffer's book, overload. There is so much overload out there in terms of what is going on. We won't get into too much what Google is doing here. We will go back to Linux.com, and somehow we've gotten off. It's nice when you lose things around here; they just tend to be lost forever. But anyway. Try to do this without having to go to, wait a minute here. Try to do this without having to go to a break here. Sometimes we do have to do this. And to pause here before we want. I think we can just keep going here and try to get to Linux.com. Well, we may not be able to. We'll do it this way. There's more than one way to do it. We'll get back to Linux.com and I think we were. Four best distributions for older hardware. Well, I guess what they call older hardware, we'll have to see. For many, the Linux operating system ability to bring new life to older hardware. Well, that's always been the functionality. We have an old PC sitting around, which can also, incidentally, be turned into a server. Now, as a look at four distributions here, one is called Linux Lite. I've not used it. I don't know. Not only is Linux Lite an ideal distribution for aging hardware, it's also one of the best distributions for new users, according to this. Don't know about it. It's built upon Ubuntu, so we now know what it is. A 700 processor. Oh boy, 552 meg of RAM. I hadn't heard of that one before. In other words, I'm not sure. Buhai Linux. I don't know what that one is. Won't spend much time. And this is another Ubuntu uses. Well, anyway, whatever. Not heard of it, but you can use 256K of RAM. Unheard of. Puppy Linux is unique in that it isn't a single Linux distribution, but a collection of distributions. That's kind of interesting here. The official Puppy distribution. The unofficial derivative AKI. Alex, anyway, I'm not certain what this thing is here. Tools by the Puppy desktop. Minimal size. It has some of the same things in it. Comes with at 224 meg. Whatever it might be. Puppy links. One of these days I'll try some of these. Lubuntu. Lubuntu is a winner as part of Ubuntu family mix. Use of LXD desktop. I don't know. Anyways, for Pentium 4s, Pentium M's, and the old AMD K8. There was a deal. They were talking about that. And it has some of the same things there. The Gumi M player and etc. here. Foxfire, a whole list of various things here. I don't know. I guess you can think about it. If you have a really old... I think one of the problems when you go back that old, most of those old ones have disappeared. Even people like myself in the 60s don't have those around anymore. So it's just, I guess you'd say, kind of a situation that things have disappeared. They are no longer there. This will do it for this open source report. We were going to look at Google's latest machinations, but sometimes there are things we have to save for another day. Let me just get to this. The did an R seminar. We'll have to link this in here. Just get the right thing. Now everything's falling down. I got my cheat sheets here. R Studio. Anyway, there's a connection here, how to build a Shine server, and we'll put it up here. This is just a little cheat sheet here, how to deal with Shine. We'll talk a little bit about it in a link here. And, well, yeah, we'll just put this up, how to build the server. We advise people just build your own Shine server. You can purchase it from our studio, but you can also bill it. So our studio, what happens here is that it's one of these products for doing basic statistical research. Very, very popular with analysts, economists, etc. We use it sometimes, but anyway, it's out there. And if you want more bells and whistles, and of course, like some other things, you go to the paid edition of it, and that is for large corporations. But majority of people, the rank and filers, so to speak, are using the free version there. How to get a Shine account, share your apps, etc. And there's some nice webinars up there. We'll put some links in to this, to our studios. Shine will do that. Almost slipped by me, but nonetheless, another open source report is in the can. We did cover Equifax and open source in the government there, and how the old school disgraced Oracle types are trying to slip back in to the fold. We are a little bit over time here, but that's okay. We're up 55 minutes or so. We'll see you next week. One of the things that's happened here, production problems. We had all these hurricanes out here, and of course over at Boston Red, it's a political show. We've been busy dealing with those and dealing with various other machinations. The federal budget, Affordable Care Act, that was mentioned there. Our Obamacare, particularly the portal, the Affordable Care Act's portal, and the early misfires. Those were due to the oracles of the world, had nothing to do with Obamacare Affordable Care. We feel it was direct sabotage, and that was why people couldn't get in there to get their insurance selections. But that was fixed. The people, as Oracle called it, from Silicon Valley came to the rescue, riding in there with white hats on, while Larry Ellison was riding out in a black hat and a black suit, with a stagecoach full of loot. So in other words, it changed some there. But now we're back up to normal. This season, however, with the Affordable Care Act, there will be 90% less dollars for promotion. And one of the reasons we're promoting it here, because many independent software developers are forced to go to the exchange, as many small business people are, and buy their insurance there. Of course, this time you can not only go to the exchange and go to the insurance broker, but in many localities, rural areas in particular, there are less choices out there. But we invite everyone, as soon as the period opens, and you will get that in your on Facebook, on Twitter. You go to the Cranston Software Twitter. We'll be, of course, announcing it, that you can go quickly to the exchange, whether it be the federal exchange or exchange in your state, and see which plans are available to you and what the cost is. And also the tax incentives, hope they'll be around, and various other items there, whether it be Medicare, combining with some of the options that are out there. They would be on the exchange, plus your Medicare, or the Medicaid options that are out there for many of these states, because there are many independent software developers do not make $100,000 a year, $90,000 a year. They work, as they say, in a toil in the twilights, picking up work that they like to do. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you next week, if not